The twin moons of planet Valora hung low in the violet sky, painting the endless desert in silver light. The wind moved softly across the dunes, carrying the faint hum of engines. A small human ship had crash-landed there hours ago. Smoke curled from its broken wings. Inside the wreck, a young engineer named Ethan Cole struggled to fix a damaged power coil with trembling hands. Ethan had been working for a cargo company that transported supplies between mining colonies. His ship had been hit by space debris, forcing him to make an emergency landing on Valora, a planet ruled by the proud alien race known as the Valorians. Humans were not welcome there. Ethan knew if he was found he might be arrested or worse. Still, he had no choice but to repair his ship before the desert storms returned. As he worked, a distant explosion echoed across the dunes. He froze. Then came the sound of engines, fast, powerful ones. A silver royal hovercar appeared in the distance, zigzagging wildly, chased by armed desert raiders on speed bikes. Ethan ducked behind his ship as energy bolts flashed through the air. The hovercar spun out of control, crashing into a sand ridge not far from him. Ethan hesitated for only a second. Then he grabbed his emergency pack and ran toward the wreck. The air was filled with dust and heat. Inside the damaged car, he saw movement. A small figure trapped under a piece of metal. When he pulled it away, he was shocked. It was a little alien girl, maybe 6 years old, dressed in fine royal clothes, her long silver hair tangled with sand. Her skin glowed faintly blue under the moonlight, and her eyes were like liquid silver. She looked terrified. "Help me," she whispered in a trembling voice. Ethan knelt beside her. "It's okay. I'm here. Hold on." He lifted her gently, ignoring the sharp pain in his arm. The raiders were closing in, shouting in an alien language. He ducked behind the wreck, trying to think fast. His small blaster was no match for them, but his ship still had one working engine, maybe enough for a distraction. He set the girl down and ran back to his ship. He crossed 2 wires together, overloading the reactor. Within seconds, the ship began to shake. He returned just in time to shield the girl as the explosion lit up the desert sky. The blast threw sand everywhere, knocking down the raiders' bikes. When the dust cleared, the attackers were gone, either dead or fleeing. Ethan sat down, breathing hard. The little girl looked at him with wide, shining eyes. "You saved me," she said softly. He smiled weakly. "Guess I did. What's your name, kid?" "I am Princess Lyra of Valora," she said proudly, though her voice was still shaking. "Who are you?" "Ethan, just a mechanic." "You're lucky I was nearby." She looked confused. "A human?" "Yeah," he said, expecting fear or disgust. But she only stared at him curiously, as if trying to remember something from her lessons. From the distance, the sound of royal ships grew louder. Rescue was coming. Lyra looked up at him again, her little face serious. "When I grow up," she said suddenly, "I'll marry you." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "What? You saved my life. So I will marry you." "That's what people do when they are brave and kind." Her small hand gripped his tightly as if she meant every word. Ethan laughed softly, unsure what to say. "You'll forget about this, princess. You'll meet someone from your own world." She shook her head, her silver eyes glowing like the moons above. "No, I'll remember." Moments later, the royal guards arrived in shining armor, weapons ready. They pulled Lyra away from him, shouting, "Get away from the princess, human." Ethan raised his hands, but Lyra clung to him. "He saved me," she cried. "Don't hurt him." The guards paused, unsure. Their commander bowed quickly and said, "Your Highness, we must leave now. The rebels may return." Lyra looked at Ethan one last time as they carried her toward the ship. "Wait for me," she shouted over the noise. "I'll come back for you, I promise." The royal ship lifted into the air, its lights fading into the night. Ethan stood alone under the twin moons, the wind whipping through his hair. He stared at the empty sky and whispered to himself, "You'll forget, little princess. You'll forget a broken human like me." But deep inside, a strange warmth stayed in his chest, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she meant what she said, and far above, in the royal ship speeding through the stars, the little princess looked out the window and whispered to the moons, "One day, Ethan, I'll find you again." 20 years had passed since that night under the twin moons of Valora. The stars that once burned bright in Ethan's dreams now looked cold and far away. The name Princess Lyra was only a memory, one he carried quietly in his heart. Ethan now worked as a mechanic on an old mining station orbiting a lonely asteroid. The place was dark, noisy, and filled with the smell of oil and smoke. Every day was the same, fixing broken engines, patching air leaks, cleaning dust from old machines. The workers were tired men from forgotten worlds, and no one ever talked about the past. To them, Ethan was just another human, quiet and skilled with his hands. But no one knew he had once saved a princess. No one would have believed it anyway. Sometimes, when his shift ended, Ethan sat alone near the viewing deck. Through the wide glass, he could see the stars stretching forever. They reminded him of her, those silver eyes shining under the moonlight. He would whisper softly, "You probably forgot me, didn't you, princess?" Then he would sigh and return to his bunk before the next work alarm began. But deep down he knew he hadn't forgotten her. He never could. One night the miners were gathered in the canteen watching the galactic news. A loud voice from the holoscreen said, "Breaking report, civil war erupts on Valora." The room fell silent. Ethan looked up sharply. The report showed burning cities, explosions, and panicked crowds. The royal palace was under attack by rebels calling themselves the New Dawn. The Valorian royal family was rumored dead or missing. Ethan's chest tightened. He stared at the image of the collapsing palace, the same place where Lyra had been taken 20 years ago. The reporter continued, "The young Princess Lyra has not been seen for years. Her fate remains unknown." The miners went back to eating, muttering about how aliens always fight each other. But Ethan couldn't move. He could only whisper, "No, she can't be gone." He left the canteen quietly, his heart heavy. Inside his small cabin, he opened an old metal box. Inside was a small silver hair clip, the only thing he had kept from that night on Valora. It had fallen from her hair when he carried her out of the wreck. He turned it over in his fingers, the tiny jewel still shining faintly. "She said she'd come back," he said to the empty room. "I guess some promises don't last forever." Days turned into weeks. The war on Valora spread across the galactic network. Trade routes were blocked. Human ships were no longer welcome near Valorian space. Ethan's company canceled all flights to that region. It was like the entire world he once knew had disappeared. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that little girl's face, her voice saying, "When I grow up, I'll marry you." He tried to forget. He told himself she was probably dead or married to some alien lord. But his heart didn't listen. One evening, after a long shift, Ethan sat again near the observation deck. The stars shimmered like cold diamonds. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared near the station, a small ship damaged and drifting. Alarms blared. The station crew rushed to the control room. "It's a Valorian ship," someone shouted. "They're requesting emergency docking clearance." The supervisor frowned. "A Valorian ship out here? That's impossible." Ethan's heart began to race. He ran to the docking bay, pretending to check the maintenance systems. The airlock hissed open, releasing a blast of cold air. A single Valorian pilot stumbled out, wearing royal armor with strange symbols etched on the chest. Before the guards could reach him, the alien fell to the floor, bleeding. He grabbed Ethan's arm weakly and whispered in broken English, "You, human mechanic, you must deliver this." He handed Ethan a small metal cube with glowing blue lines. Then his eyes closed forever. Ethan looked down at the cube. On its surface was an engraving, the royal crest of Valora, the same one he had seen on Lyra's robes as a child. He rushed to his cabin and connected the cube to his datapad. The device flickered, projecting a short hologram. The image was blurry, but the voice was clear. "Ethan, if you are alive, meet me at Moonbase Aurelia." The voice was older now, but he knew it instantly. It was her, Princess Lyra. The message ended with static. Ethan sat frozen, the cube still glowing in his hand. His breath caught in his chest. "After all these years," he whispered, his hands shaking. "She's alive." He looked out the window at the endless stars. Somewhere out there she was waiting, and for the first time in 20 years Ethan smiled. "I'm coming, Princess," he said softly. "This time I won't let you disappear again." As the station lights dimmed, Ethan began to plan his journey. He knew it was dangerous. He knew he could die. But he also knew something greater. The promise beneath the twin moons was not broken. It was only waiting to be fulfilled. The hum of the mining station's engines faded behind him as Ethan's small ship drifted into deep space. He had left everything, His tools, his job, even his safety, just to follow a message that lasted less than 10 seconds. The cube's coordinates pointed toward a dead zone near Moonbase Aurelia, a place long abandoned after the Valorian Civil War began. Everyone told him he was mad to go there. Pirates, rebels, and mercenaries roamed that part of the galaxy. But Ethan didn't care. He had spent 20 years waiting for a reason to live, and now he had one. He adjusted his ship's controls and stared at the stars. The endless darkness didn't scare him anymore. It felt like it was pulling him toward something he had been meant to find. As his ship approached the outer rim, his scanners began picking up strange signals, encrypted transmissions, bursts of static, and distant explosions. The war had spread farther than the news had said. Entire planets were under siege. The Valorian Empire was breaking apart. Lyra, he whispered to himself, his hands tight on the controls. Please be alive. Suddenly, warning lights flashed red. 3 pirate ships appeared on his radar, closing in fast. Their comms crackled. Human ship shut down engines and prepared to be boarded. Ethan cursed under his breath. He pushed the thrusters to full power, but his old cargo ship was no match for them. Laser bolts streaked past his hull, shaking the cockpit. He turned toward a dense asteroid field, hoping to lose them. The pirates followed. Inside the field, rocks the size of buildings tumbled through space. One wrong move and he'd be crushed. Ethan took a deep breath. His fingers moved fast across the controls, rerouting power from life support to the engines. Come on, old girl, he whispered to the ship. Hold together for me. For 10 long minutes he weaved between spinning asteroids, barely missing each impact. One pirate ship smashed against a rock and exploded in a flash of fire. Another crashed trying to follow him. The last one fired a missile, but Ethan did something no one expected. He cut the power completely. His ship went dark, drifting silently between the rocks. The missile lost its target and detonated far away. The last pirate scanned the field, saw nothing, and turned away. Ethan waited until his sensors showed clear space. Then he reactivated power and smiled. Still got it, he muttered. Hours later, the ship's fuel ran low. He had no idea what waited for him at Moonbase Aurelia, but he knew he couldn't stop now. When the moon finally came into view, it looked like a ghost, half destroyed, floating in orbit around a dead planet. The base itself was hidden in the shadow of a crater, its lights long gone. He landed carefully, dust rising from the gray surface. The moment his boots touched the ground, silence wrapped around him. The base was huge and lifeless, filled with broken towers and cracked domes. He walked through the airlock, flashlight in hand. Inside, the walls were covered in faded royal symbols, proof that this had once been part of the Valorian Empire. Then suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the corridor, soft steps. Ethan froze. He aimed his blaster. "Who's there?" A voice came from the shadows, calm but commanding. "Lower your weapon, human." A figure stepped forward, wearing dark armor with silver markings. Her helmet hid her face, but those eyes, those glowing silver eyes, he would know them anywhere. It was her. Princess Lyra. Ethan couldn't speak. His throat went dry. "Lyra, it's really you?" She removed her helmet slowly. Time had changed her. She was no longer the little girl he had saved. She was tall, graceful and strong, her face marked by years of struggle, but her eyes still held that same light. "I never thought you'd come," she said softly. "I sent the message months ago. I wasn't sure if it would reach anyone, or if you were still alive." Ethan took a step closer. "You're alive. That's all that matters." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Alive, yes, but not safe." Before he could ask what she meant, the ground shook violently. The sound of engines thundered overhead. Lyra looked toward the ceiling. "They found me," she whispered. Ethan ran to the control room window. Outside, dark ships descended through the clouds, rebel fighters, dozens of them. "Rebels?" he asked. Lyra nodded grimly. "They want me dead. The last true heir of Valora. Then we fight," Ethan said without hesitation. She looked at him, surprised by his confidence. "After all these years, you still protect me." He smiled faintly. "You made me a promise once, remember? I intend to keep mine too." The base trembled again as explosions rocked the outer walls. Lyra activated the emergency shields. "Follow me," she ordered. "If we survive tonight, I'll explain everything." As they ran through the corridors together, side by side, the distant roar of battle filled the air. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Lights flickered. and the ground trembled beneath their feet. For the first time in 20 years, Ethan felt alive again, not as a mechanic or a forgotten man, but as someone who had a purpose. The shadow of war had found them both. But together, under the cold light of the moon, their story was about to begin again. Smoke and dust filled the air as explosions shook Moonbase Aurelia. The lights flickered and alarms screamed through the hallways. Ethan followed Lyra through the narrow corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. The years had changed her. She was no longer the little princess with soft silver eyes. Now she was a warrior queen, her every move sharp and confident. Blaster fire echoed from above. Rebel forces had landed across the moon's surface. Through the cracks in the wall, Ethan could see flashes of red and gold, ships burning, troops shouting, chaos spreading. Lyra led him into a command room lit by blue holograms. "Seal the doors," she ordered. Her voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. A group of Valorian soldiers stood nearby. They looked at Ethan with suspicion. One whispered, "A human. Why is he here?" Lyra turned sharply. "Because I said so." Her tone left no room for questions. The soldiers went silent. Ethan stood behind her, trying to process everything. "You're really alive," he said quietly. "I saw reports. They said the royal family was gone." Lyra's expression softened for a moment. "My parents were killed in the first rebellion. I was taken away before the palace fell. For years I've been fighting to take back my world." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, but before he could, the base trembled again. The main screen flickered, showing dozens of red dots closing in. "They've surrounded us," Lyra said, her calm voice hiding the fear in her eyes. "They want me captured alive." Ethan glanced at the controls. "Then we don't let them take you." She gave him a faint smile. "Still the same, aren't you? Always ready to fix what's broken?" He grinned. "Old habits die hard." Outside, the rebels were setting up siege cannons. Inside, Ethan rushed to the main console and began reprogramming the defense turrets. His hands moved quickly, typing commands, rerouting power lines, bypassing locks. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" one soldier asked. Ethan smirked. "I built engines tougher than this when I was 20. I can handle a few ancient turrets." Minutes later, the base's exterior guns roared to life, firing bright streaks of plasma into the sky. The rebels' ships scattered, caught off guard. Lyra watched him with quiet amazement. The little human she once knew had grown into something far greater. A man who didn't just survive but fought with purpose. "You've changed," she said softly. Ethan didn't look up from the controls. "So have you. You used to promise marriage to strange humans you barely knew." Lyra laughed for the first time in years, a soft, almost musical sound. "I was 6, Ethan. I didn't know what marriage meant." "Maybe not," he said with a small smile. "But you kept your word." Her laughter faded as another blast rocked the base. She turned serious again. "They've broken through the outer walls. We need to move." They ran through smoke-filled halls as fire alarms wailed. Lyra led the way to the hangar bay. Half of it was already destroyed. Through the shattered roof, Ethan could see rebel dropships descending. "We're outnumbered," one of her guards shouted. Lyra drew her plasma blade, its blue light glowing against the darkness. "Then we fight with what we have left." Ethan looked around and spotted an old defense mech, dusty and half-broken. "Give me 2 minutes," he said, rushing to it. He climbed inside, hot-wiring the controls. The machine's engine sputtered, then came to life with a roar. "Let's see if you still work," he muttered. The hangar doors burst open and rebel troops stormed in. Ethan swung the mech's cannon and fired, sending them scattering. Lyra fought beside him, moving like lightning, her blade cutting through the enemy ranks. Together they pushed back wave after wave. The air smelled of smoke and metal. The floor trembled beneath their feet. When the last rebel fell, silence returned. Lyra leaned on a wall, breathing hard. Ethan climbed down from the mech, his suit covered in ash. She looked at him, really looked, and her expression softened. "You saved me again," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "We saved each other." Lyra stepped closer, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "The universe forgot about you, Ethan Cole. But I didn't." He met her gaze, and for a brief moment the years of war, distance, and loss melted away. The same feeling from the night under the twin moons returned, the quiet warmth between a human and an alien princess who had once made an impossible promise. Before either could speak again, the radio crackled. A soldier's voice shouted, "Your Majesty!" Enemy reinforcements incoming. Lyra turned toward the window, the glow of enemy ships lighting her face. Then the night isn't over yet, she said. Ethan stood beside her, ready to face whatever came next. And above them, through the broken hangar roof, the twin moons of Valora shone once more, witnessing the reunion of a promise made long ago, now tested in the fires of war. The cold wind of Moonbase Aurelia carried the smell of smoke and burned metal. The night sky above shimmered with flashes of fire, as rebel ships surrounded the base like hungry wolves. From the command tower, Ethan and Queen Lyra watched the storm of war unfold across the cratered landscape. Every few seconds, a plasma bolt struck the shields, shaking the walls. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Valorian soldiers ran through the corridors, shouting orders, dragging cables, carrying wounded comrades. The hum of engines, the hiss of power lines, and the sound of distant explosions mixed together into one deafening rhythm of chaos. Ethan's hands were covered in grease as he worked furiously to keep the defense systems alive. The shields are dropping fast, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. They'll fail in 15 minutes, maybe less. Lyra stood beside him, calm but fierce. Her royal armor gleamed under the red warning lights. Then we make every minute count, she said. We hold until the fleet arrives. Fleet? Ethan turned toward her. You have backup? Her eyes flickered with sadness. I sent a distress signal 3 days ago, but I don't know if anyone heard it. Ethan grinned faintly. Then I guess it's just us again. She smiled softly. Just like before, the rebels began their full assault. Dozens of enemy dropships descended onto the moon's surface, releasing soldiers and heavy walkers. The ground trembled under the weight of their march. Ethan looked out through the cracked viewport. They're not just here to capture you, he said slowly. They're here to erase you. Lyra's voice was steady. Then they'll learn what happens when they underestimate a Valorian queen and a human mechanic. Her courage lit a fire in him. He rushed to the control panels, rewiring the old power grid. If I can redirect the reactor output, we might get one more shield surge, he muttered. Do it, Lyra said, drawing her plasma blade. I'll hold the line. Ethan looked at her, strong, brave, glowing like the moon itself, and felt something stir deep in his chest. He didn't want her to face this alone, but before he could say anything, the walls shook again. The rebels had breached the east corridor. Lyra activated her comm. All units fall back to Hangar 3. Ethan grabbed a rifle from a fallen soldier and followed her. The corridor was chaos. Smoke filled the air and sparks flew from broken lights. Valorian guards fired from behind cover as the rebels advanced. Lyra moved through them like a storm, her blade cutting blue arcs in the dark. Ethan covered her from behind, firing at anything that moved. One of the rebels, a tall alien commander, shouted, "Capture the Queen alive!" "Kill the human!" Ethan fired 3 quick shots, dropping him before he could finish the sentence. "You'll have to try harder than that," he muttered. Lyra spun around to see him standing firm, his face covered in dirt and determination. For a heartbeat, she paused and smiled at him amid the chaos. "Still following me into danger?" she asked. "Wouldn't miss it for the galaxy," he replied. As they retreated to the hangar, Ethan's plan came to life. He triggered the reactor surge manually, causing the defense grid to flare like a burning sun. The entire moon trembled. Outside, rebel ships exploded in midair, caught in the energy wave. But the victory came at a cost. The power overload caused the generator to ignite. Lyra shouted, "Ethan! The core is going critical." "I know," he yelled, running toward the reactor room. She tried to follow, but he locked the blast doors behind him. Through the glass window she could see him working, sparks flying everywhere. "Ethan, stop. You'll die." He smiled through the smoke. "Not today, Princess." He rerouted the final sequence and hit the override switch. The explosion that should have destroyed the base instead turned into a controlled pulse, just enough to disable the enemy's systems. Their ships fell silent, drifting in space. When the smoke cleared, Lyra forced the doors open. Ethan was on the floor, barely conscious, his suit burned and torn. She knelt beside him, her voice trembling. "Why would you do something so reckless?" He coughed weakly, smiling. "Because someone once told me, humans are filthy and foolish. I wanted to prove them wrong." Her eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to prove anything to me." "I wasn't proving it to you," he whispered. "I was proving it to myself." She held his hand tightly, her silver eyes shimmering. "You're a fool, Ethan Cole." He laughed faintly. Maybe, but I'm your fool. Outside, the first light of Valora's twin moons touched the shattered base. The surviving rebels began to retreat, their leader's fleet crippled. The sound of victory spread slowly through the corridors. Quiet cheers, soft weeping, relief. Lyra stood at the balcony watching the sky calm after the storm. Behind her, Ethan limped forward, his arm in a sling. "You should rest," she said gently. He shook his head. "You still need me. Those reactors won't fix themselves." She turned to him with a look that mixed pride and affection. "You've done enough, Ethan, more than anyone ever has." He smiled, tired but sincere. "You said the fleet might come. Looks like we didn't need them." Lyra gazed out at the horizon, her armor reflecting the moonlight. "No," she said softly. "All I needed was you." And for the first time in a long, cruel war, peace touched both their hearts. But deep inside, both knew this battle was only the beginning of something greater. The days after the Battle of Aurelia felt strangely quiet. The sound of blasters, alarms, and explosions was gone, replaced by the soft hum of repair drones and the low whisper of wind sweeping over the moon's gray surface. Inside the damaged command room, flickering screens showed the aftermath. Hundreds of rebel ships destroyed, the rest fleeing into deep space. The Valorian Queen had survived. Against all odds, Lyra had held her ground, and a human mechanic had saved her empire. Ethan stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring at the twin moons above. His body still ached from burns and bruises, but his mind was restless. He could feel the shift in the air, the silence before something big. He looked down at his gloved hands, still black with grease and blood. He had spent the last 20 years fixing other people's machines. Now he had fixed something far greater, a queen's fate. Footsteps echoed behind him. "You should be resting," Lyra said softly. She entered wearing a simple robe, her royal armor gone. Without it, she looked less like a ruler and more like the little girl he once knew, the one who had looked at him with wonder and said, "When I grow up, I'll marry you." Ethan smiled faintly. "I've rested enough. Old habits die hard." She stepped beside him, gazing out at the sky. "Do you remember the desert that night?" "How could I forget?" he said. "You were small, stubborn, and bossy." Lyra laughed quietly. "And you were reckless and brave." Her eyes softened. "You haven't changed much." Ethan looked at her carefully. "You have." She turned toward him, her silver eyes glowing faintly under the pale moonlight. "War changes everything, Ethan, even me." Suddenly, the comms console buzzed. A transmission came through, marked with the seal of the Galactic Council. Lyra's expression turned cold. She walked over and answered it. A tall alien figure appeared in the hologram, his face stern and sharp. "Queen Lyra of Valora," he said. "Your actions on Moonbase Aurelia have violated Council law. You were ordered to avoid human contact. Instead, you fought beside one." Lyra's jaw tightened. "That human saved my life and yours. Without him, the rebels would have reached your borders by now." "That is not the issue," the alien said firmly. "You are a symbol of Valorian pride. The people look to you as a leader, not as someone who fraternizes with outsiders." Ethan stepped forward. "Fraternizes? I risked my life out there. You think this is about politics?" The alien ignored him. "You are to return to Valora immediately, Your Majesty. The Council will decide the human's fate." Lyra's voice turned sharp. "His fate is mine to decide." The hologram flickered, then vanished. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at her. "They're serious, aren't they?" "Yes," she said quietly. "The Council never forgives disobedience. They will strip my crown if I refuse." He let out a dry laugh. "So saving your world makes me a criminal now?" Lyra turned away, her hands trembling slightly. "I never wanted this. I wanted to rebuild, to unite the galaxy, not start another war." He stepped closer. "You don't have to fight them, Lyra. I can leave." Her head snapped up. "No, you're not leaving again." Their eyes met, human and Valorian, different worlds colliding in silence. Later that night, the Council's ships appeared in orbit, their lights glowing cold and blue. Valorian soldiers lined the base waiting for orders. Lyra walked out onto the balcony to address them, her robe fluttering in the thin air. Ethan watched from behind as she raised her hand, her voice echoing through the base. "My people," she said firmly, "today you see what loyalty and courage truly mean. A human stood where many would have fled. He fought for us when others betrayed us. Without him, Valora would have fallen. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nodded in respect, others in disbelief. She continued, "The Galactic Council forbids unity. They fear it, but I do not. For 20 years I lived believing humans were cruel and selfish. One man proved me wrong." She turned to Ethan. Their eyes met. "I will not obey laws built on hate," she said. "If they exile me, so be it. A crown means nothing if I must bow to fear." The soldiers began to kneel one by one, raising their weapons in salute. "For the Queen," they shouted. "For Valora." Ethan felt his heart twist. He had seen bravery before, but nothing like this. When the crowd dispersed, Lyra walked back to him slowly. "It's done," she said softly. "They'll come for me. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. But I won't let them take you." He shook his head. "You can't protect me from the whole galaxy." "I can try," she said stubbornly. Ethan smiled. "Still stubborn, huh?" She stepped closer, her voice quiet. "Do you ever regret saving me that night?" He looked straight into her eyes. "Never." A small tear ran down her cheek. She took his hand gently. "Then let me keep my promise," he blinked. "Promise?" She smiled through her tears. "The one I made under the twin moons." Outside, the wind rose, carrying silver dust across the empty plains. Lyra turned toward the sky, her voice strong once more. "If the universe calls this treason, let it. For once in my life I choose not as a queen, but as Lyra, the girl who was saved by a human." Ethan reached out, his hand finding hers. "Then I guess I choose you too." Under the light of the twin moons, they stood together, defying an empire, defying fate, and proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe was not a ship or a crown, but the courage to choose love over fear. The dawn over Valora was not like any other. The twin moons slowly sank below the horizon, giving way to a golden sun that rose over a world still scarred by war, but finally at peace. The streets that once echoed with the sounds of blasters now filled with quiet murmurs and the songs of mourning. Inside the royal palace, banners of blue and silver fluttered in the soft breeze. Soldiers stood guard with their heads bowed in respect. The people of Valora had heard the impossible. Their queen had defied the Galactic Council, refused to surrender, and had chosen to stand beside a human. Some called it madness, others whispered that it was destiny. In the great hall, Ethan stood near a window overlooking the royal city. The view was breathtaking. Tall crystal towers glowing in the sunlight, airships gliding peacefully above, and thousands of citizens gathering in the square below. He had never seen anything so beautiful, yet his heart was heavy. He knew what was coming. The Galactic Council wouldn't forgive Lyra's choice. They would come for her soon. For him too. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Ethan turned. Queen Lyra walked toward him, dressed not in royal armor, but in a flowing white gown that shimmered like starlight. Her silver eyes, soft and calm, carried both strength and sadness. "You should be resting," she said gently. "I can't," Ethan replied. "I keep thinking about what you did. You went against the entire galaxy for me." Lyra stopped beside him, looking out the window. "For the truth," she corrected softly. "Not just for you. For what you represent," Ethan smiled faintly. "A stubborn mechanic?" She laughed quietly. "A reminder that courage and kindness don't belong to one race." Her laughter faded as she looked out at the crowd. "They wait for me," she whispered. "For their queen to speak." Ethan studied her face, the same one he had seen in that desert years ago, covered in dust and tears. But now she was not a frightened child. She was a woman who had faced death, loss, and betrayal, and still chose to believe in something good. He swallowed hard. "You don't have to do this alone." Lyra turned toward him, her voice soft but firm. "Yes, I do. A queen must face her people, but..." Her eyes glowed faintly. "She doesn't have to stand without the one who gave her courage." She reached out her hand. "Come with me, Ethan Cole. Stand beside me one last time." He took her hand without hesitation. Outside, the royal courtyard overflowed with people. Thousands of Valorians gathered to see their queen. The palace gates opened and Lyra stepped out, her long gown trailing behind her, the sunlight turning her hair to silver fire. Beside her walked Ethan, scarred, human, and out of place, yet standing tall. A hush fell over the crowd. The sight of a human on the royal balcony was something no one had ever imagined. Lyra raised her hand. Her voice echoed across the city. "My people," she began, For years we were told that humans were enemies. We were told they were weak, selfish, and dangerous, but I learned something different. She paused, her gaze drifting to Ethan. When I was a child lost in the desert, it was not a Valorian soldier who saved me. It was a human, a stranger who risked everything for someone not of his kind. The crowd stirred, whispering softly. Lyra continued. He didn't save me because of duty or power. He did it because he believed every life has worth. And I carried that belief through every battle, every loss, every victory. She stepped forward, her voice stronger now. We can build a new world, not one divided by blood or species, but one bound by trust. Let today be the first day of that future. The courtyard erupted with cheers. The people of Valora raised their banners high, shouting her name. Ethan stood quietly beside her, watching the crowd roar in unity. He felt something deep inside him shift, a warmth he hadn't known in years. Lyra turned to him, smiling. Do you remember what I said under the twin moons? He chuckled softly. You said you'd marry me when you grew up. She nodded, her eyes shining. And I never break my promises. Before he could respond, she took his hand and raised it before the people. This human, she declared, stood by me when no one else did. From this day forward, he stands not as an outsider, but as Valora's greatest friend and my chosen partner. The crowd gasped, then erupted again, louder than before. Some wept, others bowed, and a few shouted in joy. Ethan stared at her, lost for words. You're serious? She smiled softly. You think I survived all this to lie now? He laughed under his breath. You really are impossible. Only when it matters, she said with a wink. That night, the palace was alive with light and music. The people celebrated their queen and her human companion. But high above the noise on the royal balcony, Lyra and Ethan stood quietly under the stars. The moons had risen again, casting their silvery glow across the city. Ethan looked up. You know, this all feels unreal. Lyra leaned against him gently. Everything real once began as something impossible. He smiled. So what happens now? She looked at the sky, her voice calm. Now, we rebuild. Together. The twin moons hung over them just as they had on that night 20 years ago. And as their light bathed the world below, Ethan realized something. This was not just the end of a promise. It was the beginning of a legend. Under the twin moons of Valora, where a child once made a vow to a human stranger, the universe watched as that promise was finally kept, uniting two worlds with a love that not even time, war, or fear could break.